Hi there, and welcome to Off the Data Provided, an interpersonal communication podcast. I'm, of course, your host, Dr. Marcus C. Shepard. On today's episode, we're going to briefly talk about a recent interview conducted by Dishwar Patel with Mark Zuckerberg, where they talk about AI and the loneliness epidemic. Additionally, we'll review the friendship formula, talk about the concept of amienship that I coined back in 2018, as well as offer you some guidelines for enhancing your communication and friendships. Of course, at the end of the episode, we will have Ask Dr. Shepard, where we'll get into a recent issue between two best friends. If you want to submit, of course, and Ask Dr. Shepard, please feel free to email me at offthedataprovided@gmail.com. Once again, that is offthedataprovided@gmail.com. So when we delve into this recent interview that Dishwar Patel conducted with Mark Zuckerberg, they had a brief segment around AI and the loneliness epidemic. Essentially, Mark Zuckerberg opened up and talked about how they are creating AI friends to supplement the real ones that you have. Zuckerberg claims that, quote unquote, the average American has 3 friends, but has a demand for about 15. So Zuckerberg, in this brief interaction, talks about how ideally they are going to create and use this AI not to replace in-person friends, but to essentially help people foster connections. So there's a lot of questions people ask around this stuff. He says, and okay, is it going to replace in-person connections or real-life connections? And he said that his default answer is that it's probably not going to. While Zuckerberg is, of course, optimistic about the use of AI friends, I, as an expert in interpersonal communication, of course, has some issues regarding this. I don't believe that AI should be a supplement to short-term or even long-term friendships. I do think potentially, if we are going to engage with AI, I have a lot of issues regarding AI due to its environmental impact. But if we are going to use AI, I can see it being used as a stepping stone to help people create and practice those social skills that they'll need. So I know in my course, interpersonal communication that I teach, which this podcast is inspired by, a lot of students tell me they're taking this course so that they can build skills to make friends, because a lot of them feel as if they're socially awkward, and so they don't necessarily have that experience. So through role play in my courses, of course, doing group work, they're fostering and working on these social skills, and oftentimes they actually create real life friends. So if we're using AI to maybe sharpen our skills, I can see that potentially as being a benefit. But what I think is probably going to be the harm of using these AI friends is that they're probably going to supplement friends and make you feel even lonelier. So if you decide not to test those skills that you've been working on with this AI companion in the real world, but essentially use these skills to just foster a relationship with AI, I think you're ultimately going to be lonelier because you're going to feel more isolated and you're not going to be leaving your home. So we're lonelier and we're missing human interaction, of course. So you should go out and find it. So while you might use these AI chat bots to alleviate that loneliness, you're ultimately staying home and isolating yourself further from people and ultimately feeding more and more of your data to this AI. And AI can get you to do that because sometimes it's gamified. We know that Tinder, for instance, is gamified, right? The swiping. But with AI friends, maybe you receive coins or gems or discount code in order to increase your user engagement. So while it can be validating, of course, to have this engagement, to have someone that's responding to you that seems as if they have similar interests and likes, it's removing the humanity of friendship. It's removing these different aspects that are encoded in that friendship formula that we will talk about and that we have discussed on this podcast, that investment, that emotional closeness, that trust, and that support. Can you truly trust an AI companion when they're ultimately designed to mine you for information and data? Are they truly able to support you offline? The answer is probably no. Are you forming an emotional closeness? Maybe so, but it might be a false sense of emotional closeness because what is the AI self-disclosing to you? You're kind of just self-disclosing to them, and it is corroborating what you're feeling. And of course, with investment, you're investing a lot of time into this AI friendship, but isn't necessarily investing into you. So I think it becomes a very slippery slope when we think about AI companionship and it being a solution for loneliness. I think that AI companionship can potentially help you work on those skills and fine tune them, but you ultimately have to get offline, as one might say, and get into the IRL, in real life world, and use these skills that you've been fostering. Of course, there's been a huge social shift that I've even witnessed in my lifetime, right? I had my first email address at the age of 9. I'm now 36 at the time of this recording of the podcast. And so I've seen socializations shift where when I was growing up, you would have small talk with people that you were in line at the grocery store, at the department store waiting. You might ask them how their day is going. What did they buy? Nowadays, most of us are on our phones. Either we're looking at something, we're literally on the phone talking to other people. We're disconnected with a lot of people in the real world. So we're losing those soft socialization skills. And in turn, what that has caused is this feeling of loneliness. And we know from different studies, these closings of third spaces. So malls, when I was growing up as a child, or more so a teenager, you would go to the mall with your friends, even if you didn't really have money. You would just walk around and you would talk and you would hang out, you'd meet new people. Malls are closing. We're relying more so on internet stores. We know that, it's not Pottery Barn, but Hobby Lobby, I believe, is closing down, right? That was a store geared towards people that did certain types of hobbies, so they could potentially run into a stranger there and maybe foster a friendship. But now if you're forced to purchase all of these things online, it's further isolating you from different people. So I think it's important to think about, sure, can AI offer some benefits when it comes to this? Potentially to sharpen those skills, but you ultimately still have to go into the real world and use and utilize these skills. And I see a lot with the younger generation, there is more social anxiety because they're not fostered into doing that. I share a great example. This had to be about 5-6 years ago. This was pre-pandemic, of course, where I went to not Bed Bath & Beyond, RIP to that store, but a Bath & Body Works with a friend around the Black Friday sale. And I literally was just having small talk with the woman at the register. And because I gave her small talk, she ended up giving me her employee discount because nobody asked her how her day was. Nobody asked her how she was feeling with the holiday rush. And to me, that was just a natural thing to ask. Of course, my upbringing, I come from talkers. I've said that before with both of my parents are kind of naturally have that gift of gab, as one might say. So I have it as well, maybe by default or just because nature and nurture being around them. So I oftentimes will chat up a sales associate if they're helping me with something, ask them how their day is going, inquire a little more. And most people don't get that, it seems. So that is also a way to sharpen those soft socialization skills, those soft interpersonal communication skills. If we remember all the way back in our first podcast episode where we talked about I, it, I, you, and I, thou communication, right? And I, thou communication is truly the interpersonal communication. The I, you communication is when we engage with people in their social roles. So if you just chat up an associate, just ask them how their day is going and flex some of those soft skills, I think that's a way to slowly but surely alleviate a little bit of this loneliness that you might be facing. But of course, I maybe am in the minority. I don't think I am, but I don't think we should be over-relying on AI for companionship. I think it will just further exacerbate the loneliness that one feels because you'll just forever be engaging with that bot and not necessarily with people who will push you, who will challenge you. And we know, at least where AI is right now, it more so is used to validate you and encourage addiction-like behavior and continuing to use it. You get caught in this filter bubble where friends, or I would argue great friends, I'm fortunate enough to have quite a few. I don't have 3. I have way more than 3 great friends, right? But they will push you. They will challenge you. They will call into question your character. They will ask you hard questions. They might not actually agree with your actions, and they'll let you know that. I literally had an interaction with Janine, Dr. Anderson, this past weekend where she said, I just want you to know I don't agree with that. And I said, great, I know you don't, and I actually appreciate that. But you're not necessarily going to get that from an AI companion. They're going to more than likely agree with you and encourage you to do whatever you want because they want you to keep using them. So you're missing out on this core tenet of friendship that we'll further explore in today's episode. So that, of course, brings me into the overview of the friendship formula. So we talked on a prior episode about what makes up the friendship formula that I've coined. And it's, of course, investment, emotional closeness, trust, and support. So investment is our time, it's our feelings, it's our energy, and it's our thoughts that we put into a relationship. And if we want to think about it in terms of capitalism, which we're all under, that ROI, that return on investment, you oftentimes don't get that from friendships at the onset. So the longer you stick with a friendship, usually the greater your ROI, right? Your return on investment is. So of course, if I think about AI companions, you're going to be doing the majority of the investing. You're going to be powering on your laptop or your phone, using your data, paying to access this companion that is mining you for data. Then we think about emotional closeness. So this is oftentimes built through dialogue and self-disclosure or shared activities. So when I think about AI companionship, how are you really fostering emotional closeness? You're sharing with them, right? You're self-disclosing with this AI companion, your thoughts, your fears, issues that you're experiencing. But is the AI companion returning that? Is it being reciprocated? As we know that happens with in real life human friendships, where if I share with you a worry I have, you probably, if you're a close friend of mine, you will soothe me, you will support me both verbally as well as non-verbally. So maybe you're rubbing my back if we're in person, verbally saying I have this. With the AI, what exactly are they doing when it comes to that? Something to chew on. We also know there's trust, right? So we have investment, emotional closeness, trust. So trust is not betraying someone's confidence and also doing what you say you're going to do. So when it comes to AI, what does trust look like? So you're clearly trusting this algorithm with your data, but what are they actually doing with it? What is in that fine terms and conditions that 99.98% of us don't read? But when it comes to friends, we know what we define as trust. If I tell you something in confidence, you're not going to tell other people. If I say I'm going to show up for dinner at 8 o'clock, I'm going to show up for dinner at 8 o'clock. And if I'm running late, I'll let you know. And then lastly, we have support. So that, of course, is verbal and nonverbal. So verbal is the words of support. I support you. I see you. I believe in you. You've got this. I hear you. What can I do to show up for you? Non-verbally, it might be a hug. It might be squeezing someone's hand. It might be rubbing their back. How do we show up that support? And in turn, AI, how is AI going to show up as your companion? So when I think about the friendship formula, and eons ago, almost a decade ago, I thought about how social media was really changing our interactions with friends that we had. So I know, for instance, when I graduated from undergrad, I kind of created a Instagram, and I followed, of course, all the people I was quote unquote friends with from undergrad. But then I kind of just became a voyeur of them on social media. I kind of, liked their stories. They liked mine, or liked their posts. Really, there weren't stories back then. We would comment on each other's stories, but that was it. We weren't really engaging offline. So for me, amiendships are relationships that were once built and maintained through investment, but are now maintained through following and limitedly interacting with one another on social media. So social media has allowed us to maintain interactions with them that may be limited to liking, retweeting, commenting, or occasionally direct messaging the person. So you still may care about this person, but your investment in the relationship has shifted to one of both face-to-face and online to primarily, or really strictly only online. So before social media, external pressures, these are competing demands, changes in our lives, or geographic distance, would take a toll on our friendships. So when we think about competing demands, because our lives are oftentimes so complex and friendships have no formalized rules that govern how often, when, or where we interact with them, they're frequently the easiest relationships that we have that we oftentimes neglect when things hit the fan, right? The PG version. So our friendships become tested when there's too much on your plate. If maybe you have a huge family commitment, a big work emergency, a huge issue maybe in your relationship, your friends are going to oftentimes take a back seat. We also know changes in our lives, maybe starting a new educational stage. So for me, when I left undergrad and went straight to grad school to get my PhD, maybe starting a new career. So that's what happens for the majority of people once they graduate undergrad is they start a career. Maybe you start a family, or you're caring for maybe an elderly person in your family or your parents. These changes in our lives can also shift our dynamics with our friends, or we have less time, or of course, geographic distance, which is a huge constraint because we focus on our new life that we're trying to build and are less focused on maintaining those connections where we were once before. So before social media, with these external pressures, you would kind of lose touch with your friends. So I know my parents' generation, which I would say is probably 2 or 3 generations before me, if they didn't give you your address when they moved, or sent you a postcard with their new phone number, right? Landlines. This is pre-internet. This is pre-cell phones. You just naturally lost touch with these people. But now, because all of us are somewhat, or I should say the majority of us are somewhat online. You have a Facebook, you have an Instagram, you have a Twitter, you might have a TikTok. People that you have begun your life with while you were on these social media platforms. So if you've been on them since middle school or high school, as I was on Facebook since high school, these people you followed, but you didn't necessarily unfollow them, where you might have lost touch with them due to these external pressures, due to moving away, a new career, competing demands. They still are following you. They're still around. So one probably wouldn't label them a friend, because while you're keeping tabs on them, you're doing so without investing in their emotional closeness, you're not further building trust, and you're not necessarily supporting them. So seemingly, you've been transformed into a voyeur of your quote-unquote former friends' lives. So you might not feel inclined to call them to catch up or reconnect because you're voyeuring their lives on social media. So I don't feel the need to call you and congratulate you on your engagement because I liked the photo and said congratulations beneath it. So slowly but surely the investment starts to wane, and so does your friendship, because friendships require active investment. Any close interpersonal relationship is going to require active investment. So steadily you begin to find out more and more about your quote unquote friends from their posts on social media and less from your own interactions with them. And while you still feel connected or attached to them, you don't necessarily feel a desire to reconnect. I'm voyeuring. I'm seeing what's happening. I'm wishing you well. So this concept of amiendships comes about for me because you're not friends, because friendship requires that active investing. You're also not former friends because you didn't have a quote unquote falling out. When I think about people I refer to as former friends, there was a definitive end to that relationship. And there was a reason why, whether valid or not, but there was a reason why we fell out. And they also aren't acquaintances because you have a shared history with these people. So amiendships has a potential of course, to evolve back into friendships, but that is going to take investment to rebuild that emotional closeness, trust, and support. So amiens, right, refer to people that you have a shared past friendship with, but due primarily to those external tensions, you're now primarily voyeuring their lives. So you may engage or interact with them when you cross paths in face-to-face communication. You might even strike up a conversation online, but it never rematerializes to the investment you once had. So that is where this concept of amiendships comes in. And every semester when I teach my interpersonal communication class, I have my students do an activity to gauge how many amiendships they have on their social media platforms. And those that are around my age, maybe a little younger, but who have been active on social media for, I would argue, a decade plus, and maybe some might even say 2 decades plus now, they oftentimes have a lot of amiens, because these are people that you would have just naturally lost, but social media has kept them tethered or tied to you in a way. And I'm guilty of it too. I have amiens who I follow and I wish them well on their social media platforms, but ultimately there is no desire from my point of view, from them, or from me, to be honest, to recommit to that level of investment to foster that friendship. So I just wanted to bring this concept of amiendships to the forefront for you to think about and consider, and maybe ponder if you yourself have amiendships in your life. I would argue you probably do on social media, especially if you've been active on a social media platform for a while. But these aren't bad things. I just think it's important to label and have them characterized differently. Because for me, friendship is an active process. You're actively investing. You're continually building that emotional closeness through self-disclosure, through dialogue, through shared activities. You're trusting this person and they're also supporting you. And this can be online, but it also happens offline. So as I've shared before, 2 of my best friends, Zamir and Darius, I met online and we invested time online, but then we also invest and have continued to invest time offline through building that emotional closeness, through trusting one another, through supporting each other. So this is just something important to think about and chew on as we continue to think about technology and interpersonal communication. So lastly, as I said before, I wanted to also give you some guidelines for enhancing your communication in your friendships. And so that brings me to just 3 things. So first is to engage in a dual perspective. So through this perspective, you should understand both the thoughts and feelings your friend expresses and how your friend views your friendship. So you do this through having that meta communication, that communication about communication with your friend. And I've shared this before, but all of my friends, we have somewhat informal, but at the beginning, it was formalized friendship check-ins. How can I show up better? What do you need more of me? So perfect example, Dr. Anderson, Janine, I was in Memphis a few weeks ago visiting her because during one of our last check-ins, I told her I want to see her more. So now we both try and commit to visiting one another once a year. So I'll go and visit her where she currently resides, and she will visit me where I currently reside. And so at least twice a year, we see each other in the midst of course, our phone calls and conversations. Also, I understand her perspective. So when I opened up a little earlier this episode, how we talked this past weekend, and she shared with me that she didn't necessarily agree with what I was doing. And I said, that's fine. I totally understand. And I am actually happy that you shared that, because our friendship is built on honesty. And that brings us to the second point, where you want to communicate honestly with your friend, even when it's not what the other person wants to hear or it doesn't paint a positive picture. So Dr. Anderson and Janine, right, we have built our friendship from the very beginning on communicating honestly. The first time we met, not really met, but the first time we hang out hung out outside of campus. She was sharing with a mutual friend of ours at the time an issue that she was having in her romantic relationship. And me, being the young whippersnapper, 20-something-year-old, just stepped in and told her straight no chaser that maybe this person isn't you. If these are all the issues that you have, this person probably isn't your man. And I remember still to this day, she cut me the dirtiest look ever and was like, who is this young man in my house trying to tell me about that? But tell me about myself. But literally from that interaction, that has been the bedrock and foundation of our friendship, where we always communicate honestly with one another. Whenever she needs an honest opinion, she comes to me. Whenever I need an honest opinion, unfiltered, even at that, I go to her. And we know that friends actually truly appreciate when people are honest with them. So even when honesty is less than pleasant or is not what we think we want to hear, we count on our friends to be that. We believe that honest feedback is what sets apart real friendships from others. So I've also called friends out when I feel like they're not following their own moral compass. And it can be awkward at first, and especially when your friendship is newer. That's really where you test the waters to see how strong that friendship is being honest with that person. And if the person can't handle that honesty from you, I think it's maybe a yellow flag to step back and think about, is this really a relationship I want? Because what I benefit and what I enjoy from all of my best friends, right, my Power Rangers, as I call them, is they're all honest with me. And it might not be what I want to hear, but it's always what I need to, and sometimes even what I have to hear. And then lastly, right, a third guideline I think important to chew on is to be open to difference. So we also need to realize that every friendship does not come in a neat package, and that not every friendship, as I've discussed before, is going to follow the same rules. So what makes friendships so unique, and what I love about studying friendships, is there are no set rules. There are no institutions that govern friendships. So if we think about familial relationships, there's usually the Department of Family Services, which kind of dictate how caregivers or parents are supposed to treat children. If we think about romantic relationships, there is the institution of marriage, and there are rules around marriage, what is quote unquote tolerated and what's not. When we think about even coworker relationships, which fall into some interpersonal relationships, there is literally the human resource department, which oftentimes have manuals about what's appropriate, what's inappropriate. But when it comes to friendship, it's the wild, wild west. Whatever works for you and your particular friend works for you and your particular friend. That might not work with another friend, and oftentimes I'd argue it doesn't. But when we're children, we're oftentimes socialized that we're supposed to have these set friendship rules, and everyone has to follow those. And while you mature and evolve and quote unquote do the work, whoever trademarked that, right? Do the work to unlearn these things, you realize that interpersonal relationships, especially friendships, are supposed to ultimately serve you and that other person. And whatever rules you need to craft to make sure that you feel as if you are being invested in, and that person is investing in you, that they're supporting you, that there's trust being built, that there's that emotional closeness, is whatever you need. So perfect example is my friend Zamir. We literally caught up the other day, and we literally have a monthly check-in on the phone. Zamir doesn't love to be on the phone, but he knows I'm a chatter, and he is too, of course, in person. But we get on the phone once a month, usually for about 2 hours. Now, between that, we'll send each other DMs on social media, we'll text each other, but we will make it a point to catch up once a month for about 2 hours. Then, of course, Kiara and Zamir, Kiara and Darius, I will talk to probably every day or every other day for hours on end. Janine, I will talk to about 1 to 2 hours every week or so. And then Jaime, of course, will check in about once every 2 to 3 months for a good hour or two. But of course, we have a history where for about 4 years, we saw each other every day, 365 for like 3-4 hours. So we built this huge, strong foundation where, of course, because of geographic distance, where he is on the West Coast, I'm on the East Coast, that just is an easier way for us to connect and reconnect. But when you're open to difference, you realize that each friendship doesn't have to be the exact same. So what I get out of my friendship with Janine is not what I get out of my friendship with Kiara, which is not what I get out of my friendship with Zamir or Darius or Jaime, aka Primo. These are, of course, my best friends. I also have other friends who are close, right, that I wouldn't necessarily label best friends, at least not yet. But I don't expect the same out of everyone. Now, of course, there are some general guidelines that I have where I tell you something in confidence, right? Trust that you don't share that. If I come to you for advice, that you're going to be honest with me, right? These are things that I hold all of my friends to the same standard, but there are a whole host of rules that change due to the friend, whether the frequency, whether the medium that we engage in, whether the activities that we share. They all differ. So be open to that difference. So of course, those guidelines are engage in that dual perspective. So you should understand your own thoughts, but as well as your friends' thoughts and feelings, as well as how they view your friendship. You're also going to want to communicate honestly, even when it's not what the other person wants to hear. And then lastly, we want to be open to difference. So realizing that every friendship does not come in a neat package. So that, of course, brings us to the end of the episode with our Ask Dr. Shepard. And as I said before, if you want to submit an Ask Dr. Shepard, feel free to email me at offthedataprovided@gmail.com. So today's Ask Dr. Shepard comes from Jane. So Jane writes, "Hi, my name is Jane, and one of my best friends and I have recently hit a rough patch after she decided not to go on a recent girls' trip. We've been friends for about 3 years, and while she said she couldn't go because money was tight and she had a lot of things to handle at work, she recently went out of town with a different friend and has made me feel some type of way. I feel like since she canceled on our girls' trip, communication between us has shifted and I haven't seen her as much. When I brought it up in the past, she's told me everything is fine and I shouldn't be harping on it. But I still feel that something has changed. I brought it to her twice now, but things still aren't back to normal. What do you think I should do?" So Jane, thank you for this question. This is actually something a newer friend of mine also seems to be going through. So friendship issues are in the air. Is that, I guess, what's happening this spring? But what I would do is I would first really sit down and think of yourself. Where do you think the issue is coming from? And think about the exact examples you can provide in communication. So as we've talked about before, words are arbitrary, they're abstract, and they're ambiguous, which essentially means that no word has a clear-cut meaning. So if I say, "I don't feel like you support me," well, what exactly does support mean? But how I can define support is by underscoring it through different examples. So I can tell a friend that you can support me more where when I, let's say, release my podcast episode, that you listen to it. When I host a game night, that you come to it. Or if you can't come to it, you let me know. You just don't not respond. You support me by answering my text message in a timely manner. And well, what does timely manner mean? Maybe I say within 24 hours because I know we all have our phones. So what I would say is take a step back and think about, okay, I feel like communication has been off with my friend. Well, what has been off about it? Has it been the frequency that is off? Has it been the depth of communication? Clearly you highlighted that you don't see her as frequently. So that's something to point to. And so when you can provide these examples and it allows your friend, because especially if they're interested in fixing this issue, to address those issues directly. So if you just feel like, I feel like things are off, well, it's easy to shift and say, well, I don't feel like things are off. I think we're totally fine. Okay, but if you say, hey, we used to talk 3 times a week, and now we barely even talk 1 time a week. And when we do talk 1 time a week, it's only 30 minutes, where we used to be on the phone for 2 to 3 hours. Something's happened. What's going on? And maybe, as we've talked about earlier in this podcast episode, there are competing demands. So maybe work is really kicking up for this person. And we know this economy is hard, so I think a lot of people are trying to do their best, saying their P's and Q's so they aren't fired or given a reason to be let go. But setting that up where you can provide concrete examples for this person to engage with is going to be important. I also think what you should think about is, how does it make you feel when your friend dismisses you? And why do you feel this way? And is it easy for your friend to dismiss you? And think about and bringing that up to your friend. As we've talked in a prior episode, we have friends for a reason, a season, and a lifetime. And so when I talk about my best friends, those are people that I see as lifetime friends. The majority of them I have been friends with for over a decade. I think the most recent one, Darius, I've only been friends with for about 8 years. But even 8 years is a lifetime in this day and age. So also think about, well, is this person just a reason or a season, right? I had a former lifetime friend, or someone I thought was a lifetime friend, that really ended up just being a season friend. They were supposed to see me until I got to 30. And when I turned 30, our friendship kind of dissipated. So is this maybe you guys are just drifting apart potentially? So I say take a step back. Think about what are these concrete examples where you can explain to this friend, not necessarily dictate, but explain to this friend where you feel that things have changed. And also, or lastly, I should say, use that I language. I feel blah, blah, blah. I feel when you do this, da, da, da. Because it's, I would argue, not that person's intention to make you feel that way, but it is how you feel. So your feelings are valid, but it doesn't mean that that was what they wanted to make you feel. So definitely think about the issues. Think about bringing up concrete examples. Think about how you feel when you've been dismissed. Think about, is this someone I really want to fight for this friendship? Is this a lifetime friend or maybe even a long season friend and I'm not ready to give up? Maybe you are, and this is kind of the breaking point. And then when you do have this conversation, I think for the third time, as you shared, you talked to this woman twice, really lay it out in I language. I feel this way. My feelings are valid. I'm not saying that you want me to feel this way, but this is how I feel due to these actions, due to the fact that we don't hang out as much. I feel neglected because even though you couldn't go on our girls trip, you went on another girls trip or a friend trip or whatever type of trip with someone a few weeks later. So was money really that tight? Were you really busy at work? Right? I think you really need to bring this up, and that's that honesty of friendship. And depending on how this person responds, I think you will have your answer if this is a friendship worth fighting for, or if this is friendship that maybe is towards the end of its road. And that also is okay, because we do have friends for a reason, a season, and a lifetime. So thank you all for listening to the latest episode of Off the Data Provided. I am, of course, your host, Dr. Marcus C. Shepard, and I will see you on the next one.